Hello guys, my name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine and I vlog daily to keep you updated on the real life situation in my country as we have this war with Russia that we are going to definitely win. And right now I'm at the university, please forgive that generator sound, we don't have electricity and that's why you have to get used to this background noise that perhaps for the next months will accompany my vlogs. I have some time and I have some light, so I have decided to record this video in the different environment. Why do I have some time? Because not all of my students show up with their course papers and it was the time to check the course papers. Well, they have some excuses like blackouts, but I'm still considering what to think. Also, this year we have decided to have a shorter semester and it finishes in a couple of days and students will have really long vacations. Close to 3 months. This is not our choice, this is the reality we live in and we're going to have dark and cold months and with these blackouts and things like that it will be safer and more effective like to have vacations and then to work harder during Saturdays or something like that. And I see that in the media there are lots of news about various Russian monuments that are destroyed all over Ukraine, and I want to speak a little bit about that and Russian culture in general. I know that very often Russia uses its culture as an argument to describe itself as a vital element of global society, and many people who had doubt at the beginning of war whom to support were actually charmed by the idea of strong and beautiful Russian culture. Well, first of all, I have to say that I'm Ukrainian and it's very difficult for me to be objective, so you have to forgive that. Secondly, I do understand that we don't have to equate 100% culture to the war that we have right now, but I am honestly not a fan of Russian culture, and let me explain you why. The first thing, many sentiments that maybe you have to Russian literature, Russian music and Russian paintings are focused on the 19th, 18th century authors, and when we think about modern Russian musicians, modern Russian authors, writers, painters, we cannot name a lot in comparison to the end of the 19th century or the middle of the 19th century. So we have to say that that Russian culture that so many people like is actually the culture of the previous century, not of the modern Russia or of the Soviet Union. Another thing is that actually for me Russian literature is very, very gloomy and dark. Of course, it has to be present in the world, but the general impression that you get, for example, for me is pretty dark. Or maybe the disrespect of human life. It tells actually a lot about Russian society. Poverty, wars, winters, I don't know, other things. You don't feel very optimistic after reading Dostoevsky, for example. Once again, I'm not saying that we don't have to read these books, but I'm saying we don't have to be fanatical, because many people protect Russian culture without actually reading or understanding Russian culture. One more thing is that Russia wanted to be an empire. It failed to be an empire. It is impossible as empire without Ukraine. That's why they are fighting so hard for us. And in Ukraine, in every city, we had monuments to Pushkin. Pushkin is the prominent Russian poet, once again of the 19th century. And he never visited my city, but I have a street, even now, a street in my city named after him. Pushkin was chauvinist, he was supporting various Russian invasions to Caucasus, he, in his poems, disrespected indigenous peoples of Russia and so on. So I cannot say that he is 100% perfect, but even if he is the best poet, the question is, what is he doing in my city? Well, he has no connection, he's not a part of our culture, he never mentioned Ukraine in his works, and he is just symbolizing that these are the territories, or these were the territories of the Russian Empire. So many of these monuments that now disappear in Ukraine as a result of decolonization. We take away the monuments not because we disrespect these people totally, but in case, for example, with Tsaritsa, the Queen of Russia, Katerina II, Katerina II in Odessa. It's pretty logical. She ruined our Cossack siege. She made lots of problems in Ukrainian history, so it was a question why her monument was here for such a long period of time. But in many other cases, these are just the remains of this dying Russian Empire, and these monuments and names of the streets were to symbolize that, well, this was also a part of Russian Empire. Once again, there are no connections, no logical, no emotional, no cultural connections between these personalities of Russian culture and, for example, my city. Also, I do love my community on the channel, and thank you once again for leaving your wise ideas. And I had one person reflecting about Russian culture and saying that there is a huge difference between art and culture. So many of us respected or liked Russian art, but this Russian art joined together did not manage to create Russian culture. Culture makes people more civilized. Culture must be present then in Russian armed forces that wouldn't be looting and raping and would follow the rules of Geneva Convention, for example. And it must be present in everyday life of people who are not angry, hungry, and like consume very primitive music, films, jokes, use lots of bad language, and like alcoholism is a culture of some Russian cities. But I cannot say that I can vividly feel that Russia is a cultural society. So perhaps there is a difference between art that some Russians produced back in 19th century and culture that maybe did not manage to survive or even to shape itself. Moreover, many of bright people in Russia disappeared during the Soviet era, and now when I think about those influencers, opinion leaders, various cultural leaders, I cannot name like 10 people who would speak, who would talk about the problems Russia creates in the world. There are no voices heard from Russia. So, and for me, the function of culture, the function of art is to develop personalities, to make people prominent, to make people representatives of their own country, their voices. And what are the voices of Russia? Well, tell me now, if you know, persuade me. Name me some really influential Russian people who live in Russia, who speak about war in Ukraine, who speak about Putin as a dictator, something like that. No, you cannot name many. Maybe you will name me 10, but they have like millions, hundreds of millions of Russians. So for me, I am really happy that these monuments disappear, the names of streets are changed, not only as a process of dehumanization, but also as a process of decolonization. And also a thought that I developed in reading some of my emails from you was the fact that Russia wants to be an empire, but it is not an empire. Why? Because traditionally empires, even though it's bad, they are toxic, they destroy cultural identity of the countries they occupy or take under control. But still, traditionally, centers of empires are very advanced, live better than colonies, are more vivid in innovation, science, level of life in its society. But it's not about Russia. Russia wants to pretend that it is an empire, and Ukraine is its colony. And then we look at Ukraine and we see that standards of living in Ukraine are much higher than in Russia. And they loot our sneakers and send them back to their gloomy, small, dark, cold Russian cities. So Russia is not an empire, and we have to understand that. And its culture, I'm not sure is present right now. It is more about violence, the culture of violence, the culture of hatred, the culture of fear. I don't know. So when you see the monuments of Pushkin falling on the streets of Ukraine, don't think that we are vandals. Just understand that Pushkin has no connections with Ukraine. Pushkin disrespected Ukraine, and he was standing here for decades just to show that we are occupied. He was a symbol of occupation, and that's it. Thank you very much for your support. Thank you for buying me coffees, understanding our electricity blackouts, for becoming my patrons, and for being with Ukraine during these dark times. Let me know what would you like to know from our culture. It would be interesting for me to record some positive videos too. Slava Ukraini!